Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, especially at such short notice. But it's fantastic that Jeremy could join us this evening. So a massive round of applause again for Jeremy for joining us. Thank you. My name's Charlotte Gerard. I'm the South East Community Organiser, and I've been working here in Hastings and Rye, working here supporting Peter during the general election. So first of all, we're going to have Antonia speak. She's a local councillor, but she's also a mental health nurse, and she's going to tell us a bit about the impact of cuts to the NHS, and particularly on mental health, and the difference that a Labour government would make once we're elected on the 12th of December. Thank you, Antonia.
Thank you, Charlotte, and welcome, Jeremy. The NHS is in danger under the Tories. The NHS is by far our greatest institution, a transformative vision created by a Labour government, but it is in grave danger. The NHS saved my daughter's life when she had a serious blood condition requiring a daily transfusion that would have cost nearly £1,000 a day, something I would never have been able to afford under an Americanised health system. And that is a true worth of the NHS, not that just that it saved my daughter's life, but that it would make the same effort no matter who you were. The radical kindness that protects us from cradle to grave, that is there as we enter this life, and it is there at our departure, that no matter who you are, no matter what you earn, you matter. And I've got to admit, I'm struggling as I see the service and staff pushed to breaking point after almost a decade of the Lib Dem and Tory-led austerity ideology. Nurses are facing unprecedented levels of stress and distress as they cannot safely do the job they love and are so passionate about because there's simply not enough of us. There are currently 44,000 unfilled nursing vacancies, with nurses starting their working life in debt by almost 2.5 times their annual salary. The Tories were warned 4 years ago that scrapping the nursing bursary would lead to shortages, but did they listen? Did they heck? They watched nursing numbers fall, student numbers drop by almost a third, overseas applications dropping by an incredible 98%. And then they sat and they jeered and they cheered while voting down a fair pay rise. Yet, they think that they have a magic nurses tree, where a claimed 50,000 more nurses will appear, as if by magic, before admitting that almost 20,000 of them were already working in the NHS. And how will the Tories retain these nurses when morale is at an all-time low? When the nurse relies upon hundreds of thousands of unpaid overtime, the goodwill bank is running dry and staff are on their knees. Only Labour has committed to bringing back the bursary, to scrapping tuition fees, and committed to a pay rise so desperately needed by all our public sector workers. The Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn are the only party that listen to the voices from the front line. They are the only party willing to make the change that is really needed. Mental health provision under the Tories has already been brought to its knees. Already there are not enough beds available for the most seriously ill patients in need of inpatient care. Vulnerable men and women are often sent hundreds of miles away for an available bed, taking them far away from all the people and all the support network that they so desperately need. But this is not a problem isolated to mental health. Cancer patients are having to wait longer for appointments to see a specialist. life expectancy in the 5th richest economy in the world having fallen and flatlined since 2011, emergency waiting times are the worst in October than at any time since records have been kept. And that's before the winter has truly begun. Social care has been crippled, with areas of the country now described as care deserts. Areas where there is no care support available to support people in their own homes. Rather than keeping people well at home, this short-sighted Tory government has pushed thousands of people into hospital beds and in addition has caused 120,000 avoidable deaths by their continued austerity ideology, whilst rejecting outright the UN report by Philip Alston that laid bare the levels of poverty in this country. Their manifesto promises 5 more years of the same, with no solutions offered for the social care crisis that they have created and which Mr Johnson has somehow promised to resolve. But it's only the Labour Party that is offering the real change with a national care service. And it's not just the nurses, it's the doctors I work with at a breaking point too. Of course GPs see home visits as a vital part of their job, but they are overworked, inundated by government-set, task-driven goals, and with patients suffering more health problems as a result of austerity. A 12-minute consultation to unpick a very complicated picture of many different issues exacerbated by a crumbling social care system is not enough. As a nurse, I have borne witness to too many stories of heartbreak, of poverty, of despair, and how I wish I could write a prescription of hope for each and every one of those patients. But what Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party have created is not just a prescription for a course of treatment, but a whole bloody manifesto of hope for a cure. We cannot trust Johnson and the cruelty of the Tories. We cannot sustain another 5 years of a Tory government. And it is my public duty as a nurse to inform you that 5 more years of the Tories will destroy our NHS. So let's protect our NHS. Let's work for a Labour government under Jeremy Corbyn, because only Labour has the commitment and the vision to reimagine the NHS for the rest of the 21st century and to ensure that that radical kindness of the NHS continues. Thank you.
Thank you. You can't see a thing up here because the lights are in your eyes, so I assume there's a lot of people out there. I can't really I kind of get the feeling from the applause. Okay, this is good. It's a good evening, and it's been a good couple of weeks. It certainly felt pretty good out on the doorstep. I know it's going quite well. It's going to be close. It's going to be tight. We need all the help we can get to win Hastings and Rye, but I think we can with your help. And thank you to everyone who's been out so far. 50, 60 more people out on the street at any one time, knocking on doors, delivering the leaflets, my little brochure as we called it. And it's gone down well. People have been writing back to me, emailing me and telling me that they appreciate what we're doing, that they like the materials we're circulating, and that they're coming over to us. So I think we are in with a very good chance. I wanted to talk a little bit now about, because Labour's made an announcement today about rail travel and rail fares, and talking about 30% off the fares. And of course that will be possible in Hastings. In fact, if you've got a season ticket to London from Hastings, that will mean £1,600 a year less you would have to pay. It's a lot of money. And of course we can do that because we are going to bring the railways back into state ownership. And if you look at what the Tories are offering for the railways around here, they put out a press release recently. The only thing they got in mind is this idea of bringing HS1 trains to Hastings and Eastbourne. It's a project, it's an idea, but the press release said 140-mile-an-hour trains coming to Hastings. Now, to do that, you would have to extend the HS1 line. The cost of that, based on the cost of HS2, because that's how much high-speed train lines cost now, would be £22 billion. Are they really intending to spend 22 billion quid to knock 10 minutes off the journey time to London from Hastings? I don't think so. So what they're talking about is, 140-mile-an-hour trains, but from Ashford they're going at 40 miles an hour because that's the speed limit on that line. It just doesn't make sense. Their sums don't add up. And, of course, their whole ethos around this is business cases. What you do is you say, OK, if we just look at this one line here, we can bring these trains into Hastings at a cost of so many millions or billions, but then you pay some very expensive consultants to tell you that, if you make this case here to bring these trains in here, it will cause an uplift in the economy. And I've seen these reports, and they say things like, it will cause an uplift in the economy of, per year, £253,947,356.92. And it really is that kind of nonsensically precise. And of course, the fact is, it's the wrong way to plan a transport system. Ironically, Transport South East, who are a Tory-controlled body, that's one of the new transport boards locally in the southeast of England, have actually come up with a pretty halfway decent integrated transport plan. But of course the government's got no way of funding it. There's no suggestion that anyone's actually come up with the money to do it, but it's a start. And what it looks at is the way the whole of the rail and road network can be looked at across the region and across our constituency, certainly, in a sustainable way. Looking at how buses join in with that, how rail and road and the kind of first mile, last mile parts of journeys. The fact that if you want to get people onto public transport, you've got to make the first mile and the last mile of the journey easier. All that is in there. It's not a bad report, but of course the government has no way of funding it. And that's what we need to take forward. We need to look at proper integrated transport planning. We need to look at making that as low carbon as possible and ideally having a zero carbon footprint. And we need to look at walking and cycling networks locally, buses to rural areas. There have been cuts to that. The fact that Stagecoach have completely wiped out all the opposition and put the fares up and are now reducing their services, that's a real issue, and in particular out in the villages around Rye in the constituency. All those things we need to look at, and we need to bring in that funding, and of course Labour will do that. We've got the funding in our manifesto for improving the transport network, in particular improving those issues for Hastings and Rye. The other thing I wanted to mention is education, because again we're going to be talking more about education this week. I had kind of quite a shocking meeting today with a teacher from Arc Alexandra. And what she was telling me about, it's a new academy because it's the combined Helenswood and William Parker schools. Some of the things she was telling me, they were quite shocking. She was saying that all the teaching assistants have been cut. No teaching assistants there at all now. The behaviour team has been cut. And they've had to kind of start looking at ways of how they can reinstate that because of all the problems that's resulted in. She said that they just don't have enough resources and that teachers are having to buy just things like felt tip pens and marker pens for the students. Students at A level having to buy their own books because they're not being provided by the school. And really most worryingly, I think, she said that assaults on staff are relatively common now, both verbal and physical, and they don't even have a recording system in place for them, let alone any action for dealing with it. So I think you can see that some of the things that are happening in our education system in our schools now, here locally, are not good. And education achievement locally isn't good either. It's well below national average, and the skills that young people come out of school with are not good. And even our college, although you can't blame the teachers certainly for this, they are working their very hardest. It's all about the levels of funding, and it's about accountability in the academies as well. I want to see a system where academies are made much more accountable. I mean, I'm a school governor in the last remaining maintained non-religious school in Hastings. And there, I'm just an associate governor, actually. The full governors, it's an intensive job. You have a lot to do. Anyone who's been a school governor knows. And the governors really do run those schools. That's democratic accountability of a school. Don't have that in academies. The academy governors are really just an advisory body, and most of the teachers don't seem to know who their governors are. That doesn't happen in a traditional maintained school. So we've got a lot to do there in terms of changing the academies, making them more accountable, but it really, again, comes down to funding. It comes down to money. There have been so many cuts in the education sector that it's shocking that we've now got to this stage where teachers don't feel safe in their workplace, where there isn't enough money to buy books and materials. This is like Victorian times. It is really back to Victorian values, where we just don't have the money to educate our children. This has to change. We have to get money back into schools, we have to fund them properly, and we have to look, particularly in Hastings and Rye, at how we can get our education achievement levels up to where they should be, and broaden out the curriculum too, so it isn't just focused on a few small core subjects that, again, in the academies they tend to be obsessed with. So I just wanted to kind of cover those two areas. Those are just two things. I could talk an awful lot, but we haven't got much time, about lots of other things too. But those are just a couple of issues and problems that I think we need to address in Hastings, and I think the Labour manifesto will help us do that. So there's more than a week to go. We can see the opinion polls are getting better in our favour. Here in Hastings and Rye, it's looking quite good, as I said. So I think if we all get out there and we all work hard and we all get everyone else to help and we all persuade everyone we can to come out and vote for real change for the many, not the few, on December the 12th. So I'm sure I'll see more of you all, but do everything you can. We can win Hastings and Rye, and I think we can get a Labour government too. So thank you very much. And I should have introduced our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Hastings, for all you do as a wonderful party, wonderful constituency Labour Party. You're campaigning day in, day out, all weathers, all round the year. And I want to say thank you as the leader of the party to a wonderful constituency. Thank you for all that you do for our party. And as the town that gave us the ragged-trousered philanthropists, the next thing you need to give us is Pete Chowney. And I've already dared him that when he makes his first speech in Parliament, I want him to get up and say, Mr. Speaker, representing Mugsborough, I wish to explain a few things about this town. Pete, thanks for all the campaigning work you are doing as a candidate, but also the great work you've done as leader of the council and the achievements you've made there. Because winning is important, obviously, and winning isn't done in the last week. It's done over quite a long time. It's that strength and that basis in the community that is so important. And that's why I'm so proud of the way our party has developed into a community organising force that's so strong within our communities. Charlotte, who introduced this evening, is one of our many absolutely brilliant community organisers. Thank you. And this evening we were talking to people on surviving on the streets. What a fantastic group they are. What brilliant work they do. Talking to them about how they raise money to buy food and get donations of clothing and how they give it to people who are up against it. And indeed, I've just spent quite a while talking to some people who are rough sleeping around the town about their lives, what happened to them, and the disasters that befell them. And you can hear these stories all over the country. And I was asked, what's your priority when you win the election? Think about it. There's so many, many, many priorities, so many things that have to be done. I just have to say this, my absolute priority is dealing with the situation facing rough sleeping homeless across our country. Because there's something morally wrong about a wealthy country that tolerates people sleeping rough, that tolerates the idea that some will depend on food banks to survive, that tolerates the idea that some of our children will go to school hungry, that tolerates the idea that somehow or other these things are sort of inevitable, a kind of act of economic law or something like that. And then you look at what's happened over the past 10 years. We now have 150 billionaires in Britain. But you know what? Some of them are quite mean because only... well, hear me through. Wait. Before you make judgment, hear the facts. There's 150 of them. That's like 150. Only a third of them, 50 of them, are donating to the Tory party. Well, how mean is that? How did they get to be billionaires in the first place? And so the Tory party, funded by billionaires and the very rich, unable to produce reports on a lot of things, including the influence of Russian money on the British political system, unable to tell us the truth about all of that. And our party, I'm proud to say, our money for our election campaigns comes from those in trade unions at work who donate some of their salary to their union, which goes into the political fund, which helps to sustain the Labour Party. And £2 million donated by people all over the country. The average donation, £25. Compare that to the billionaires who fund the Tory party and the £25 donations that fund the Labour Party. Doesn't that say everything you need to know? Everything you need to know about what's at stake in this election campaign. We've had everything possible thrown at us as a party. We've had unbelievable levels of abuse thrown at individuals in leading positions in our party, their lives turned apart, torn up by various so-called media investigations into them. I'll tell you this, when they go low and attack us with personal abuse and all the rest of it, we don't respond, we go high. And when they get into the gutter, as they frequently do, we go to the skies, because we are better than them. We are better able to behave in the intelligent way that we would want our society to be. And so, our manifesto, this document here, this wonderful manifesto, is written by many brilliant people, and told him that he had written it because, yes, he obviously coordinated it, but it's been written by lots of very knowledgeable people, lots of very expert people, but in reality, it's the product of our processes, of the discussion we have at branch meetings, the discussions in union branch meetings, constituencies, National Policy Forum, lots of places. It's the collective thoughts of all of us of how we want our world to be in the future and how we want to go forward to win this election. And so, in the last 10 days of this campaign, we're building on all that work we've been doing for a very long time. We're building on those campaigns. We're building on those successes people have had at local levels in defending hospitals, defending libraries, defending schools, all those sort of things. But I tell you what, I'm fed up with defending places against closure. I'm fed up with having to do all this campaigning to stop something being closed. I want to lead a government that opens things, a government that builds children's centres, a government that builds schools, a government that builds houses. And I want to lead a government that's serious about dealing with the injustices and inequalities that exist in our society. In 2010, the Liberal Democrats and the Tories got together and formed a coalition. They met in the Rose Garden of Number 10. I have to say, I think that garden should grow vegetables as well, don't you? It's just a thought, that's all, just a thought. Because I do think land should always be put to productive use. Not that roses are unproductive. I'm sure there's somebody here who's going to tell me they're ecologically sustainable, and they are. It's okay, I get that. But it is that coalition that made a choice. They made a choice. They could continue bailing out the bankers and put austerity on the rest of us, or they could have done something different and invested for the future of all of us. They took the political decision, the political choice of imposing austerity. And that first budget, what did it do? Cut welfare spending, cut support for local government, froze public sector wages, went on to introduce the Health and Social Care Act, which has led to 10 billion of privatisation within the National Health Service, went on to treble university fees to £9,000 a year, went on to create, yes, create the hostile environment that was so brutal towards the Windrush generation who've given so much to our country and our society. And they made those decisions knowing exactly what the consequences of them were. They knew that it would end up with deindustrialisation. They also tried to deregulate the labour market. And so we have a country that doesn't even meet basic ILO conditions, and we have a real problem of people's security in their jobs. And so I am very keen that our manifesto is fully understood in all its parts. A journalist said to me today, Mr. Corbyn, the country can't possibly afford your manifesto. It's far too expensive. And I said, are you sure the country cannot afford it? Because unless we invest for the future, where will the jobs of tomorrow be? Where will the housing of tomorrow be? Where will the trained workers, the nurses, the doctors, the teachers, the engineers, the architects and everybody, where will they come from unless you look through the serious proposals that we're making here? And there's so much in our manifesto that I could talk about all night, but I'm not going to be allowed to do that because I've been told I've got to go back to London tonight in order to start another day's campaigning tomorrow. I've only been to 50 constituencies. I've got a lot more to go to. But I just want to... I just want to say this about some of the points in our manifesto. The National Education Service will be the legacy that we will leave for future generations. It will be the principle that education is free from cradle to grave. It will be taking the market out of education and inserting the right to education. And as Pete explained, it will be bringing preschools and academies into the family of education, into the family of the local education authority. And it will be proper nursery facilities for all 2 to 4-year-olds, free for 30 hours a week. And it will be the end of university fees, tuition fees, and it will be proper equality of esteem, of value between those that do vocational education to get an apprenticeship and get a qualification, or they go to university and get an academic qualification. We need all of that. We need both within our society. And I'm so proud of it. Our National Health Service is Labour's greatest achievement. No question about that. The 1945 government came in after an election campaign in which Labour was completely written off, his chances by the national media completely wrote them off, and a leader who was roundly abused by the media. Just saying, because I'm fascinated by the history of our party, our movement, our society, and how things come to change in life and in society. That government was no doubt told by many experts, you can't possibly be serious. A National Health Service? What? You mean a worker goes to a hospital and gets treated free? No, can't be having that. You can imagine the arguments used against it. People won't value the service if it's free. Uh-huh. You go to a hospital, go to any hospital, talk to people when they're queuing up, waiting to be treated and so on. Ask them what they think of the NHS. They may well have things they're complaining about, usually their health, but nobody ever says the solution to all our problems is to get rid of the National Health Service, do they? They never say that. And so when President Trump arrives tomorrow, no, we treat guests with respect. I've just got a very simple message. I have studied the papers of the meetings that the British Conservative government has been having with the US Department of Trade over the past 2 years, authorised by Theresa May, authorised by Boris Johnson. And you go through those papers, and it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. They're there happily discussing extending the patents on medicines so that they cannot be sold in generic form, but only in the patent form, for export to the British market. They're discussing access to our health service by American pharmaceutical companies and others. They're talking about access to our public services. They're talking about investor state protection, which is a way in which an international process, which we would have no control over whatsoever, decides whether a company has been badly done by because it's invested in Britain, where we've decided to raise the minimum wage, for example. And you think this is all pie-in-the-sky stuff. Well, I tell you what, Philip Morris and other companies have taken other countries to court for them trying to improve the health of their populations. Well, this to me is more than disturbing. And when one of the British officials sort of deftly raised the question about could the issues of the climate emergency and environmental disaster facing the world be included in our trade negotiations, they're told pretty bluntly, no way, the US administration will not tolerate any of that kind of thing. So the whole basis of the trade arrangement is access to public services, is getting their hands on our National Health Service, and is ignoring the major issues facing this whole planet, such as the environmental emergency. So my simple message, and it is a very simple message to both Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, is our NHS is not for sale. To them or anybody else. And so the future is ours to make. The future is ours to win on the 12th of December. Do you want a government that will end the scandal of 0 hours contracts, give workers the protection from day one of their employment, of access to employment rights, give workers that opportunity to retrain and develop, and raise the minimum wage to a real living wage of £10 an hour, including for young workers? These things are all clearly there in our manifesto. Ending the gender pay gap, ending discrimination at work in any form, building that society where we respect and work with each other, and we do not allow racists in any form whatsoever to divide us. But it's also about facing the greatest issue facing this world, and that is the climate and environmental emergency that we have at the present time. If we walk away and do nothing about it, it will get worse. It will mean there will be rising sea levels, there will be global warming, there will be unusual and extreme weather patterns, there will be floods, there will be famine, there will be drought, there will be disasters. At the moment, mostly but not exclusively affecting the poorest people in the poorest parts of the world. But nobody can escape it. So, on May the 1st, I proposed to Parliament a motion that this country declare a climate crisis, an environmental crisis, and that was agreed by the House of Commons. It was agreed mainly because Michael Gove demonstrated in his rather lengthy speech that he doesn't like me one little bit. I can cope with that, that's okay. But he also had no real arguments against it, because he has to recognise the seriousness of it. So we are bound by the Paris Climate Change Accords of 2015 to get to a net zero emissions by 2050. At the current rate, we might reach it by 2099. Globally, it won't be reached till well into the next century. That will be too late. The global warming will have gone too far by that stage. And so our manifesto makes the commitment. We will do everything we can to reach it as soon as we can. And if we can get there by 2030, that would be fantastic. But it's also about not threatening people, but seeing this as an opportunity to create green energy jobs all across the country, to build the Swansea Bay Lagoon, to build the Mersey Barrage, to build the wind farms all along the coast, and make sure that the coastal communities, the seaside towns like Hastings, benefit from the energy created by them, and they get a suitable dividend to help them with community development in those places. And the retrofitting of so many of our homes that at the moment waste so much energy and cost so much to waste so much. So it is about investment. It is about investment in broadband technology to make sure that every home in the country within 10 years gets free broadband access through fibre optic cables. That's an investment which means you can develop jobs and communities and industries in all kinds of remote places where they will not go at the present time, which again reduces the transport needs and costs. It's also about public ownership of our railways in order to make sure they're electrified and make sure they're clean, but also a bus service worthy of the name over the entire country. There's so much that the green industrial revolution will bring about that's so exciting. And it unites people together. Those that are passionate about the environment and those that are passionate about seeing investment in their communities that have seen precious little since the end of the miners' strike in different parts of the country. And so our manifesto is there for social justice, there for economic development, there for what we will do on the climate issues. But it's also there to address the grotesque imbalances that exist in our society. The WASPI women were grievously misled by government. They've suffered grievously since then. And I was told, you can't possibly do this, it's too expensive, and some women shouldn't get it because they might earn more than the others and are too wealthy. My reply is simply this. It's a contract between the government and the people. You pay your tax, you pay your national insurance, you get your pension, you get your support, you get your social security that goes with it. And if the Tories and the Lib Dems want to break that contract, shame on them. A Labour government will not break that contract of support for people. And so we have a very short time to go to complete this election campaign, and hopefully, I'm absolutely determined to see it, we elect a Labour government on December the 13th. That government that can start to redistribute wealth and power, that government that will bring an end to the endless debate about what people did or didn't do in 2016, but bring people together so that we can face the future together to end austerity, make sure we have trade with our nearest neighbours, protect the Good Friday Agreement, but above all, invest in the future to end austerity. And so, when you go out campaigning, door knocking, when you go out engaging people in conversation, listen very carefully to everything they say, because this manifesto is a product of that listening exercise. and take people on board with us, so that when that Labour government is elected, our strength and our party, our unions and our community will be in working together with that government in delivering the housing that we need, ending rough sleeping homelessness, building those children's centres that have been closed down all over the country, developing those green energy jobs all over the country, providing apprenticeships and good quality training for people all over the country, and providing that sense of opportunity and hope. In short, to build a country that's fit for the next generation to live in. I'm fed up with our young people being told, pay for your education, pay for your health, pay for your pension, because nobody else is going to do it for you. What is wrong with us? One of the richest countries in the world in the 21st century, that we tolerate these degrees of inequality. And so when they say, well, where's the tax coming from? I simply say this: it's all costed. John McDonnell's costed it very, very carefully. Yes, the richest 5% will pay a bit more. The richest and biggest corporations will pay a bit more. And that will take us to a level of spending roughly equivalent to France or Germany on the level of public service that they have. That's how far behind we've got since neoliberal economic ideas took over our political discourse. And so, please do absolutely everything you can to listen and persuade people of the importance of voting on December the 12th, and to go out and vote on December the 12th, whatever the weather. But here in Hastings, there's nothing ever than sunshine in my experience. I've been here so many times. I've even been sunburnt in Hastings. I've been up that cliff and got sunburnt on my head just walking up there. So you never know, you might have a wonderful day on the 12th of December. But whatever the weather, when you've got Pete elected as your MP, you're going to have a wonderful day the next day. So can I ask you, put everything you can into winning on December the 12th, and the road to a Labour government starts in Hastings, and it will take us there to bring justice for the people of this country. Thank you very much. Can you get Pete to come up?
One thing I do have to say, just there's a gig with Attila the Stockbroker. Those of you who remember him, I do, back from the 80s actually. He's been around a long time. I'm old enough to remember when he was on the circuit as a punk poet a long time ago. It's down in the cafe down here, starting I think pretty much after this event. So stick around, have a drink, go and watch Attila, listen to his poetry. Still more to go if you want to stay here. Thank you.
Well, what do you think of the main event? Our next Prime Minister just stood up in this stage and gave yet another excellent speech in Hastings and Rye. And what we've got to do, we've got to get out and we've got to knock on those doors and we've got to get people out so we can get Peter Showney elected as our MP and get Jeremy Corbyn as our Prime Minister. There's only one way we're going to do it. Let's pledge to put our time forward and make sure that we can get those two men into Parliament and into into Cabinet and into government. Thank you everybody so much for your support. And we will need that support, just remember, getting a Labour government's not just for Christmas, it's for life. So let's make sure we do it. Thank you everybody so much. Have a nice evening.